Early in the morning, hadn't had a chance to post a new video, primarily because YouTube took down my last video, so I ended up getting a strike for medical misinformation. And of course, I pressed them for what was misinformative about my video, and of course, they couldn't tell me what was misinformative. It was my last video entitled talking about Israel, and of course, follow the science was my, the picture with that lady with the bag over her head and a mask. And of course, I wrote in. I said, "There's no reason to strike me." I cited all of my facts, like I'm in freaking college all over again. I'm like, "Look, here's my citations. Put them in MLA format if you like it." And I left a little quote with each one, indicating from each source where I pulled such information, and of course, the videos that were there. And of course, I'm very careful about how I speak so that I'm not assuming or putting too much of my own words into what's going on. But of course, unfortunately, YouTube struck that down. I pressed them again after they had rejected my appeal. And of course, they could not tell me why. They just quoted, the rules. And I'm like, "Well, which ones?" And they just say the rules. And at that point, I was just like, "All right, I guess you don't like the information that I posted. You don't want people looking at it. So it is kind of what it is." So I finally had the opportunity to post another video. It's probably about 4 o'clock in the morning or so. I'm getting ready for the trading day, just doing some reading. Like to be up early in the morning to see what's going on in the market. I do a lot of investing, especially now. Now, the purpose of this video was more talking about from the male standpoint. Many people, you probably see red pill information all over the internet, right? Red pill, whether it's red pill, blue pill, some people have, the black pill, purple pill, white pill, whatever it is. There's all this different segregation of the male population in terms of what they believe and in the direction that they want to go. I mean, it's all just levels of weakness in my experience. Just thinking about and meditating about what's going on. In my last video where I talked a little bit about Kevin Samuels and what was her name, Blue Diamond, I forget, and how she understands men really well. And when you look at men today, men are either being abused by women in the state or have advocated for completely removing themselves from society in terms of dating, etc., right? Dating, having kids, which are the tenets of either men going their own way, or even red pill as well, of no kids, no cohabitation, and no mingling of funds, right? For the purpose of not getting robbed by the state. And so men, in essence, are able to pinpoint where the issue is. They know that the real issue lies with the state, but refuse to take any action. They've seen their predecessors came before them, the men's right movements, and how the state bitch slapped the men's right movements. And so the next group of men who were the thinkers of their age basically had already waved the white flag of surrender. And so instead of realizing that they need to dig deeper and to push harder, they decided, well, we're just going to go ahead and altogether surrender to the state. And now we're going to espouse the tenets of depopulation. And which is why, in my opinion, the red pill knowledge falls right in line with the elites who have been pushing depopulation for a long time. And so those who operate based off under the red pill of no cohabitation, no children, you're literally stating openly that you have decided to throw away your birthright of having children, right? Having those succeed you, if you're not considered one of the top tier men, etc. Now, of course, all this is related primarily to the monetary system that we live under, where the governments can basically print money. And since a lot of it revolves around voting and having favor and currying favor with the people, and since by nature, outside of any manipulation, women will typically outnumber men, and that's just based off of biology, because a man can impregnate more women, so you need more women than you necessarily do from a biological standing need more a surplus of men, like what's happening, for example, in places like China, where they have more men than they do women, and so in essence, so China imports women from Korea. Now, this is all related to the system, right? To the system of things. And so men have basically decided that we're not going to fight the system, even though we outnumber them 100, a million to one. And this is all based off of just inherent weakness. As the strong men, many of the strong men had died off, either they were led off into wars. And as a result, the only thing that was left when all these men who went off to war for World War II and World War I, when they died, there were no men that were there to raise those children outside of weak men. And as the expression goes, right, strong men create good times. Good times create weak men create hard times, which is basically where we are at. And unfortunately, we're not at the pinpoint time where we're seeing a shift towards strong masculine men. What we're seeing are actually even weaker men as the state continues to push things like homosexuality, especially within the Black community, where you see a lot of pushing the agenda of down low, open. You see men recently, kissing on TV, and this is pushed very heavily, which is why a lot of times you'll see famous Black celebrities, and many of these individuals are made to wear a dress. They're feminized. They're demasculated by the state for the purpose of making individuals weak, because the state knows psychologically eventually what happens is that strong men rise, which is why even among the military, they're doing the exact same thing. And it's because if you can beat men down long enough and feminize men long enough, well, then in essence, you've won it all. And the longer that persists, the harder the times will become, until the point where they just realize we don't need these men altogether, and they just start wiping away men, and which is why you hear more and more about depopulation. You look across the entire West, and the entire West is basically dying, along with places like Japan, which is why China wisely stated that they were going to increase the amount of children that they wanted from their people, from just a one-child policy to 2 to now 3, and why they're pushing masculinity, because China wants it all. And so instead of other nations realizing that that is the way, that we have forgotten the old ways, as they say, they're just in essence doubling down. Now, shifting the conversation a little bit, typically when there's more of a movement of men who talk about, well, we're going to start traveling, like passport gang, as they say. And of course, you who want to go out and see the world, and you meet other women, and then you come back, and it's literally like the slaves, where you talk of freedom, and you're like, hey, there's patriarchy over here. And the men that you come back to, they don't believe you. They want to sit here and tell you about hypergamy, that all women are the same, etc. But what they won't talk about is the system, which is the real problem. Yes, hypergamy is the same no matter where you go. It's a simple dating strategy. Just like men do the exact same thing. Men will look for the best type of woman that they can find in their life, and they will choose to mate with that individual. Not necessarily always about looks, to sleep with them. Sure, they will do that, but once you realize that that's all that person has, well, then you realize really quickly that's not a person that I want to mate with. But women don't look at it that way. Women will look at it from the standpoint of resources. Will this individual be able to provide for me and to be able to provide for a family? In America, that is not necessarily the case, or why you see more women talking about, I need a man who's a 6-figure earner. That's just because of the inflation. As inflation starts to rise and women start to get doled out more money so that the state can keep control over the women, and that's typically what the state does, then obviously you're going to have to come to the table, right, as they say, with more money, because the state, right, the real daddy, is the one who is fitting the bill. And so you're competing against the state. to be able to keep these women. And then at the end of the day, the state tells the women that if at any point in time you can pull the ripcord, and we'll come in and we'll club them in over the head, we'll extract all the resources that we can, and then we'll give you a share of the wealth, in essence. And that's basically what has been going on for decades. Men have not chosen to risen up. And so at the very least, some men have decided, you know what, we're gonna travel to a new area. And then of course you hear talks of it's dangerous over there. Well, no shit. When you go to an area that's primarily patriarchal, it's more dangerous. Why do you think the women required a man? Because it was more dangerous. And so the women needed the protection of the man, because the society in which they live in, the patriarchal society, is by nature more dangerous. And so you hear men, there was that recent video, talking about that black guy that got killed in Colombia, in Cali. Cali is a little ghetto, right? If you've never been to Cali, Cali is a little ghetto. So you gotta be careful how you walk. And he was flashing around hundreds of thousands of dollars, and unfortunately got himself killed. Now, of course, the details, I'm not fully aware of, whether there was a woman involved and he got himself, caught out there talking too much about his money. That can happen, especially in a poor area. But if your goal is that somehow America is going to go back to a patriarchal society, that's just not going to happen. Only two ways that happens. Either the country collapses economically, or the country has a civil war. Those are the only two instances, and neither one of those you want to be a part of. That's just a reality. Who wants to live into an America that in essence turns into a Venezuela? That's the only instance where it will come back. Or there's a civil war where finally men rise up and they push back against the state. Those are the two instances in which in the West, that patriarchy could return. But there aren't strong men like that. There aren't brave, masculine men like that for that to happen. And the state, of course, is going to do everything that they can to hold on to their power, which is what you're watching right now. If you're wondering what all this C-19 stuff is related to, it's primarily related to retaining power in the West. If you're not paying attention to what's going on in the stock market, then you would have no idea of what's going on. But if you understand if you understand what's going on into the markets, follow the money. Where the money is, so is the power. And that's the only thing that matters to many of these individuals. You may have recently seen how the troops are being pulled back to the Americas, as well as in Europe, from places like Afghanistan. And I sit here and wonder why. And I think eventually what's going to happen is that people are going to realize what's going on. Either they're going to make a much stronger push for people to take it, and they're going to get the military involved. And that's why they're bringing them back. They're bringing them back for you. I'm bringing them back because they've ended the war. They realize that there's a more dangerous threat on the homeland. That's why they're bringing these individuals back. Talking back about traveling. The purpose of to travel is to see what's going on else in the world. Here, they tell you all kinds of stories. It's dangerous out there. People are dying left and right. The streets are dangerous. Meanwhile, you got people here in Times Square who are getting shot left and right. They gaslight you because they don't want you to leave. You can't leave the plantation. That's the point. They don't want you to leave. They don't want slaves realizing, oh shit, you telling me I could have a patriarchal way of life over there and it's cheaper instead of being a wage slave here in America? And I've been saying that for quite some time, that if you're a young man and you have a skill, that the window for leaving starts to narrow, especially because you become indoctrinated over time. That, oh, I got to stay here. America's the best, the land of the free and the home of the brave, right? That's what they tell you, right up until they take all your rights away. And then what? And then many of these men will literally just go on. A lot of these will come take it 1776, all over again. They imagine that you think these individuals are gonna put up a fight? The government could come out the very next day and demand their weapons, and I guarantee you the vast majority of these people would turn them over. That's why the bullshit narrative of I lost it in a boating accident. It's like, when you have to say shit like that is the time where you have to use those weapons. When the state comes knocking at your door and says, give me your shit, it's not the time to pretend like you lost it in a boating accident. It's the time to shoulder your rifle. But instead, weak men expose themselves by their own words when they say that. They show how weak they are. Like I said, if you're looking for a patriarchal way of life, it is not going to be an easy life. You will have to go, like I've said in numerous other videos, to either a first world or potentially to a second world country to find it. You'll have to live the hard life that our ancestors led, who lived in a patriarchal lifestyle. That's completely up to you. Or you can remain here and enjoy the luxuries. But don't let anybody shame you into worrying about the dangers abroad. I mean, for a lot of these men that claim to be alphas or they claim to be masculine, that's the sort of life that patriarchal men lived. They lived in dangerous times, which is why they were heads of families, which is why they were responsible for women and children, because the times were dangerous and they were required. They were required to take the lead. Here, the government takes the lead. The government is in charge of your children. Look at what's going on with critical race theory. You've got parents telling, I don't want this stuff taught to my kids, and the government says too fucking bad. You got people saying, I'm not gonna take it, and the government says, well, you're gonna get a knock at the door. This is the modern society that many of you men want to live in. Some of us don't. Some of us realize, right, time to spread our wings and to fly abroad to different areas. Yet, will they be dangerous? Yes. Does that require you to be a masculine man? Yes. But the opportunity to live the lifestyle that you're looking. If you're looking to be a family man and not have the state be involved in your relationships, there's the opportunity. Plenty of land out there that has been undeveloped. And you can change it, find a group of men and try to make a new home for yourself. Because you're not going to be able to do it alone. You have to have like-minded men. You have to be willing to come together and to create. If you want a different sort of environment for yourself and for your ancestors, your future children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, then you got to be willing to go abroad into different lands. It's not going to be here in the Americas. It's not going to be in the West. Because the only two ways that it'll happen is through a civil war or through a complete economic collapse. And neither one of those you're going to want to be a part of if you're not looking to go to war. And if you go to war, more than likely you will see an economic collapse. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. And I'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching. Of course, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe.